at the molecular level, there's also what we call as um, vestigial structure, which includes CMAH, no? And then we also discussed speciation, the formation of new species. Um, some of the discussion was about the the process of speciation over time, diba? Wherein it starts with single variable population, and then they are still distinguishable but interbreeding, but they are now considered a subpopulation. And then the third one is that they form distinct population, but still they are considered as similar individual, high variation. But the problem here is that they have limited interbreeding. And lastly, they become highly specialized and they rarely meet. And so reproductively isolated or reproductive isolation takes place. And thus, when we say a reproductively isolated population is observed, then this is what we call as a formation of a new species or what we call as speciation. Now, the third one, which we are going to discuss today, is evidence of macroevolution, which is new forms from old. So, when we talk about macroevolution, this is something to do with new life forms. Now, whether new life forms descended from old, there will always be evidence. No? And macroevolution is basically always associated with what we call as evidence, no? Or an old evidence such that it includes fossilized remains. So when we say fossils, so the ones that you can see right now, these are examples of fossilized structures. No, I think these are dinosaurs, a very old invertebrates, and of course human skull. So these are traces of an organism that lived in the past. No, they are not found anymore. They are not. They are considered to be extinct as compared to extant. So pag sinabi mong extinct, they are no longer here. These are organisms that lived in the past. When you say extant, these are organisms that are currently roaming around the earth. No, it's still alive and can be seen as of today. Now, because because fossil exist, and we can, I'm sure that most of you, no, majority of you have seen fossil records, no, in the National Museum. It indicates, no, that life has changed over time. So hindi lang siya basta a change in a structure like in microevolution, but it is more of a change in the totality of the organism. But what is interesting is that when these fossilized structures, no, when these fossils, when you try to observe them and that they live in the past, somehow, no, they are related, no, to some species that are extant, and that it indicates that life has changed over time. And there are two important words that you need to learn now, no, and that is what we call as extinction, and then there's another one called succession. So we all know the term extinction, which is when an individual is basically lost, no, not doesn't exist anymore. It lived in the past, no. On the other hand, when we say succession, um, the fossils which lived in the past, no, and the living forms are basically found within the same geographic location. This is what we call a succession. But before we dig in detail about this concept, no examples. The picture that you can see right now is actually an Irish elk. No, so during those early times, no, about 1800, no, there's a naturalist, no, and he said that there are some species, no, that are said to be fossilized, no, in Europe. And they're saying that these remains most probably be found elsewhere, roaming around. No, uh, they're saying that these organisms that are like fossilized, they are still living in other parts of the earth, and that they probably had escaped detection. Okay, and so when people started looking at uh, remains and started to look a lot of representative um, fossil records, no, particularly this the ones that you can see right now, itong parang deer na ito, no, itong giant animal or huge ice like ice age deer. um People are saying that somehow this one is basically roaming around, no, but interestingly, no, when they try to really observe this particular individual, as well as those that are found in America as well as in Europe, no, the reindeer found in America, like American moose or the European reindeer, it doesn't really match of what they observe on these fossils, no. And several researchers, paleontological researches, no, that were conducted really revealed the extinction of most of the species that have lived on Earth. So they try to dig huge number of fossil records, and they can't match except on several groups of organisms wherein when they actually try to observe the fossil records, like for example in this case those that are found in Argentina and those that are found in Australia, no, um, they observe that there are certain types of fossilized glyptodon, the one on the left side, is somehow very similar to those that are found in Argentina, particularly the armadillos, and it is only found in that area. Likewise, yung mga marsupials, no, that lived in Australia is somehow similar to the ones on the right side, no, that are actually similar to that of the wombats as of today. So you see, when mammalian faunas of certain continents or certain geographical location are actually very different, and that the ones that are actually living right now has a very striking similarity with the fossil records that are actually found in that area, then this particular pattern is what we call as succession, no. So the general pattern between fossil and living forms, and they are found in the same local or geographic location, we call them as what we call as successions. Yan. See? Nowadays, no, when they unearthed several uh, what's this several um, fossils, those that are found in in Argentina, no, in South America, they have similarities with those of the armadillos, but it's not really exact, no, that we can say that they are considered as still roaming around, but there are some similarities, and this is what we call as successions. No, you see, extinction and succession are the pattern we would predict if present day species descended with modification from ancestors that lived before them in the same regions. So unfortunately, we don't see in the Philippines any of this, as the Philippines has been, uplifted, no, geographical uplift. The way by which Philippines was formed is through geological upliftment. No? Well, except for uh, provinces or islands of Palawan and islands of Mindoro, but mostly they were all due to geological upliftment. Yeah. Okay, so this is a typical example of macro evolution. Now, another very important thing that we need to consider as far as macroevolution is that when living organism descended with modification from earlier forms, those that can be considered as found in fossil records, there might be some clue or what we call as some link. And this link could probably considered as organisms that contains or individuals that contain certain characters that somehow link those that are considered as fossils or extinct, as well as those that were linked that are considered as extant. And we call them as transitional forms. No? So they're saying, class, that if novel life forms descended with modification from earlier forms, then the fossil record should capture evidence of transmutation in the progress. So this particular transmutation could probably be a species with mix of features. But it doesn't necessarily mean to say that those species with mixed features are considered species that or extant species directly evolving or a direct ancestor of the ones with the mixed characters. And thus we consider this as transitional forms. I'll show you a clip, no, which is a terrestrial fish. Um, Watch this, no. This is a uh, Alticus Arnold room, no. Can you see the video, class? Nakikita nyo ba? Yan, no. So they are considered as the Pacific leaping blenny, a terrestrial fish. See? Ayan. So they are called leaping blennies. Um, let's watch again if you want. There. So they spend their life, no, their larval phase as a plankton, of course as egg as a planktonic, a larval phase as planktonic, meaning they are at the mercy of currents. And then they leave the ocean and then they go to the Rockies, the splash area, the intertidal zone, no? And they eat algae and so on, no? When they try to study these sleeping blennies, no, so they started studying this, and they started to placing them in the water. Interestingly, the fish immediately jump back or jump out of the water. No, they don't swim, and because of this particular character, this type of fish was considered as terrestrial. No, and so you see, terrestrial blennies, here, no, terrestrial blennies, they have several characteristics that made them survive in the land. Let's look at again the video. I think you can see in here that they have, see, they have like gill-like structure, no, uh, that breathe on air, and their skin is, making moistened because that's their respiratory surface. Yan. Now, okay, let's again just watch it first. Yan. Now, interestingly, there were other two types of blennies aside from Alticus arnoldorum, which is considered as a terrestrial fish. One is called Prialticus labrovitatus, no? Um, which actually feeds on land, but they stay close to the water. Pero they go to the land and then they feed the water. Somehow we can say they are amphibious type, di ba? On the other hand, there is another blenny called Bleniella gibiferans, no? Which only appears on land if accidentally thrown by waves. But they go back again to the aquatic environment, no? So you see, these kinds of um, type of fish that are actually found in Pacific is a very good example of a transitional form. Interestingly, a living transitional form. But as I said, it doesn't mean to say that the Alticus arnoldorum directly descended from pre-Alticus lavrovitatus or the amphibious blenny. It's just that probably, no, the Alticus arnoldorum descended from a certain type of animal that act as a ancestor for the um, leaping blennies, which is the amphibious, and that of the ancestor of the Alticus arnoldorum. So in this particular example, we can say that Pre-Alticus labrovitatus is considered as a transitional form. No? So as I said again, by calling the amphibious blenny a transitional form, we are not claiming that it descended from the aquatic blenny or that that the Alticus arnoldorum descended from this, no? Instead, what we are trying to point out is that blennies are consistent with the concept of macroevolution, no? That there could all have that they could all have an ancestor that is aquatic, and that at a certain point in their life, uh, they split and underwent speciation, no? One remains aquatic, the other one goes to land, no? So the ones that is aquatic is the Bleniella, that's the aquatic, and the one that becomes amphibious is the Prealticus, and of course the the terrestrial now, which has a unique trait of tail twisting, is basically what we know today as Alticus. As far as transitional form is concerned, no, meron daw tinatawag na most common, no? What's this? Popular, famous rather, transitional form. Yan. The Archaeopteryx is considered as one of the most form, and this was discovered shortly after Darwin published his book on the origin of species. So what is interesting about this Archaeopteryx? So we all know from our children's book of dinosaurs, Archaeopteryx is like a crow-sized animal. No, we can say it's a bird because it just because it has feathers. No, ayan. Ayan, nakikita niyo na ba uli yung PowerPoint? Yan. I don't know kung saan ako naputol, but I think dito sa slide na 'to 'no, nawala yung wifi. So, anyway, bukas may pasok na naman, eh. So, as I was saying 'no, um, they their hypothesis for a while class. Their hypothesis was actually made, you know, they have several um they have made several discoveries na yung kanilang hypothesis about transitional forms is considered to be correct by the discovery of several other dinosaurs, particularly with rudimentary feathers. So, for example, in this particular diagram, um, they were able to discover Sinosauropteryx. No, they have rudimentary feathers. No, the feathers were actually found in as fossils. No, um, they have feathers on its neck, the back, even the tail. No, um, there are several other types of dinosaurs. No, um, that were when they tried to observe, no, they were able to discover that those particular birds, or rather those particular dinosaurs feather, are somehow very similar to the birds now that we know. So you see it is difficult to say, if bird, what distinguishes bird from other groups of these dinosaurs, no, if it's just based on the presence of feathers, then what is really the importance of feathers? No? Um, if feathers are for flying, then why is it that the bony structure of most of these dinosaurs with birds doesn't really match with those that are present day birds? No? And that they're saying now that the presence of feathers is not really for flying. No, feathers is not for flight, but they're saying feathers. is for thermoregulation. So yun ang sinasabi nila, no? Feathers is for thermoregulation. Yan. Okay? Any questions, class? Oh, by the way, no, um, if you have any question, you just unmute and unmute your mic and then ask me the question, no? So any question?
Sir,
Yes.
is it possible then that even they involve yung feathers for thermal regulation? Is it possible that the other theory of feathers using as elaborate displays, for instance, meron daw, I think na-study nila yung Sinosauropteryx and they found pigmentation dun sa feathers nila, which according to dun sa study na yon is a chestnut colored with various rings around the tail, which is an indication that meron sila parang elaborate na parang display for mating selection.
For mating.
Yes.
Probably. Probably it could be a mode of sexual selection at that particular time. Because of I'm not really familiar with that, but when you were able to read it, if you're able to read it, uh, was there a like dimorphism regarding like a male will have like this, a female will have like this, or there were no specific information about are the males have this elaborate feathers or are the females are the ones with this elaborate feathers? Wala naman.
According dun sa as well, the study, yun lang na-examine lang nila eh, kasi according to this one fossil, yun lang nakakita ng pigment feathers eh. And
Mm.
possibility yung nakaroon sila ng flight is maybe one individual eventually na-climb sa trees and then escape via gliding eventually parang na-progress na nila yon na parang this is advantageous so we like ano evolved for these types of feathers to involve more ano complex na parang movement for flight.
Yeah, probably. But these are all hypotheses, no? Because we can macroevolution. We cannot really uh, have the idea, have the means of test. These are not testable, nor measurable type. It's based really on observation of trying to correlate what is the characteristic of present group of organisms or the extant ones. Yun. Okay?
Yeah. Parang ganun. Parang pag sa mga test na to, nitithink nila yung pinaka believable option dun sa ano in terms of like this topic around na extinct animals.
Yes, of course. Those that are based on a priori knowledge, the most acceptable based on the available data is the most acceptable hypothesis. But still, all of those things are considered those evidence no are considered as hypotheses no inferences meaning they are just mga hula no mga possibilities uh, based on data available data okay
Okay, sir.
okay so why now macroevolution matters um macroevolution matters in our everyday lives because for example this one hiccups no most of us I'm sure that we all experience hiccups and there's a lot of myth regarding hiccups no but this is considered always whether whatever myth surrounding hiccups it is very annoying right. And apparently, they're saying hiccups is a highly coordinated event. Of somehow there's a sharp intake of breath because of somehow muscles our in the intercostal muscles, like muscles of the rib, diaphragm. Somehow we are trying controlling inhalation and so on. And they're saying no that this particular um, activity no somehow is very much associated with breathing controls in distant ancestors, like for example amphibians no breathe with gills as juveniles, and then frogs, for example, frogs have gills during larvae, and then they have lungs as adult. And when modern tadpoles breathe in water, they jump and they rapidly try to close the glottis so that water will not be moving no directly towards their lungs. And you see this type of coordinated motion of allowing the glottis to shut down or to close rapidly is a vital function of normal breathing, probably associated later on with normal breathing. So you see, this particular example is just an inference. It is just considered as part of what we call as a hypothesis to understand what we experience right now. Why are there organisms that looks like this, trying to explain the behavior, the ecology, as well as the selection of other organism nowadays. Okay, there. So let us now go to the next, which is one of the pattern of evolution is that all life forms are related. So this is the next event, no, or the next pattern of evolution, in that macroevolution necessarily includes evidences from common ancestry. So we've seen that in our previous examples about transitional element, a transitional organism, no, and transitional features. There will also be what we call as ancestor-descendant relationship. But every time that we consider ancestor-descendant relationship, we have to consider always the concept of what we call as homology. Homology is literally means likeness. No, homology is that there is a similarity that underlies the obvious physical differences among species. No, they're saying that homology is same organ in different animals under every variety of form and function. No, now typical example of homology here. No, the limbs of bats and limbs of birds, but not the wing. No, what else? These plants that you can see on the left side, no, the pitcher plant, the poinsettia, the cactus, and then the Venus flytrap. They all descendants of leaf. They're all homologous. Whether their functions are different, no, but they all came from a common ancestor, and those are plants, or those are living organisms characterized with unique leaf like arrangement. As far as homology is concerned, there are the first one is called structural homology. So meron tayong tinatawag na structural, no, meron din tayong tinatawag na molecular homology. So meron daw dalawang klaseng homology. So when we say structural homology, a very typical example will be that of Cuvier, which is the founder of comparative anatomy. Owen and Cuvier describe extensive similarities among vertebrate skeletons. No? So in this particular diagram, you can see vertebrate forelimbs. They are used in different functions, but they have same sequence arrangement. Tingnan niyo yung humerus, how it is attached to the radius and ulna. How the radius and ulna attached to carpals, to metacarpals, and then to the phalanges. Although they are very different as far as function is concerned, but still, no, they're the same, di ba? The hand of a man for grasping, yung mole for digging, horse um, for jumping. You have a dolphin, no, paddling, and then of course wings of a bat. They use for gliding, and the way by which the bones are attached, they are indeed underlying a certain design as far as forelimbs. Yan. Now, if you're gonna look at, for example, these pictures, although they are streamlined bodies, they do not considered as something that is homologous. No, this is a shark and the other is an orca. Both have streamlined shape, powerful tails. No, but it doesn't make sense as far as the structure is concerned. One is bony, the other one is cartilaginous, right? Even the skeletal structure of an orca and that of the shark is really different. Ano pa? Here, these are all called orchids, no? And the flowers of the orchids shows a great diversity, morphological diversity. Why? For them to attract pollinators. Similar to forelimbs, regardless of how, no, regardless of how they look like, regardless of how uh, the basic function, their function is, the flowers are the same relative to positions. Like receptacle first, and then there's sepals, and then there's petals, and then there's the stamen, and then there's anther, and so on. As far as animal plants are concerned, yan, these are considered as non-homologous structures. Cactus and a euphorbia. A cactus and a euphorbia, even though they look the same, but they did not originate from the same leaf-like ancestor. One is a stipule, the other one is a leaf. No? Understanding homology is actually very important in testing hypotheses for common ancestry. So if you're going to look at this diagram, no, you can see evolutionary history of a hypothetical snails. The common ancestor of this is a blue shell, or rather a blue snail, no, in the far left side, and then it diverges, no, speciation happened wherein it created daughter lineages. One maintained its blue like structure as an extant one, while the other lineage evolved elongated shells. And then those had undergone speciation several times. No, they develop bands, other develop or change color from blue to pink. and then one group, which is in number 8, somehow change the position of of the shell, no, into elongated, or how do we, high type, no, high spired ones. So if you are going to look at this particular diagram, no, here, you can place all of them in a specific Venn diagram of relationship. That those traits that are shared is in a, they are shared in a nested pattern. Those with spikes, no, is nested within the ones with high spires. Those with pink, they are nested in one, no? And then those that are characterized by having elongated ones, regardless of they are high spire with band, but as long as they are elongated as compared to the rounded shell, they are actually found in one square, no, sharing characters. Aside from morphological or structural homology, there's also what we call as molecular homology. Now, similar to the previous discussion about transitional, or rather, was this about vestigial structure in in our DNA, in molecularly speaking, in humans, no, there is a what we call as a genetic flaw in chromosome number 17, no. The flaw in chromosome number 17, the one you can see right now, is actually sits a gene for a protein called the uh, PMP, no, or the peripheral myelin gene. And this PMP22 gene is flank. So pag sinabi nating flank, napapagitnaan, no, sila ng identical na DNA sequence called CMT1A, yung color yellow. And this is actually a repeat of a certain gene. It was duplicated, no? So the presence of the CMT1A repeat is a flaw, meaning hindi dapat dalawa yan, no? Among the products of these are two copies of yung PMP22 gene, and then the other one is a missing chromosome, no? So ganun daw ang nangyayari, which is this one. Yan. Now, because of unusual crossing over, kung titingnan nyo, hindi sila nagpapantay. Nagkakaroon tayo tuloy ng tinatawag na misalignment. No? So, minsan dumodoble yung CMT1A, PMP22, and then the distal ones. Nag-undergo ng repeat or duplication. So, pag nag-undergo ng duplication yan, then ibig sabihin, um, it will have problem later on with what we call as um, crossing over. And it develops certain types of diseases. Yan. Okay? What else? Another thing about this CMT1A is that when duplication happens, no, the proximal repeat can align with the distal ones, and this results to an abnormal phenotypes. So yan yung mga nangyayari, no? Yan. What else? Here. In this particular diagram, no, they wanted to know, they tried to study pseudogenes as well as development of new genes from different groups of organisms. And in this particular diagram, you can see that a gene can be seen evolved several million years ago. No? So based on the genes itself, we can say that human, chimps, and gorilla somehow are very similar to each other. No? These genes are homologous. No? They don't have any function, but they accumulate more mutations accumulates, and therefore creates what we call as a pseudogenes. But what is interesting is that they are said to be at high concentration in a certain group of organisms, and that the higher concentration somehow is similar to other groups of organisms, like in this case human, chimps, and gorilla can be characterized based on the presence of enolase that evolved 11 million years ago. And of course, the ultimate universal molecular homology is this one. Whether it is a bacteria, no, whether it is a what's this, a bacteria, a fungi, or any other groups of organism, they all utilize this genetic code, and this is basically homology. No, this is what we call as a universal molecular homology. No, other genetic codes are possible, but this genetic code is considered as similar for the rest, no, of all organisms. Of course, with minor modification, like for example, triplet codons, what's this? The formyl methionine in prokaryotic organism, but technically they're all the same. So similar to the others, why common ancestry matters? Of course, common ancestry is a conceptual foundation upon which modern biology, including medical science, is built. Understanding the lineage, no, of a monkey, a mice, no, even a bacteria or a fungi will allow us to understand machinery inside a cell, how we all are related. And understanding relatedness allows us to understand all organisms that can be that we can use to answer certain questions, no, later on. Okay, so again, no, this particular chapter discusses the importance of all evidences or evidence, sorry, of all evidence regarding evolution. That evolution is possible, change in a population from one generation to another, no, which is macroevolution. Speciation happens because of lack of interbreeding. There is extinction, there are succession, transitional forms that shows macroevolutionary event, and that all living things are somehow related due to homology, no, whether it's more structural or molecular. Okay, so stop presenting. I think that's it, no, for the lecture. So it's like this class, no, we are going. You will be doing something for the lab later. I'll also be explaining some other instructions for Thursday. And so we will be meeting again at 2:40. Please log sa sa ating sa ating uh, Google Meet at 2:40 using the other link